to introduce the congressman tonight. I got an email late this afternoon and said, we'll send you a small bio. Well, this is what they sent me. It's not a small bio. So I told the congressman that they don't want to hear me standing up here talking about him. What you want to hear is you. So what we want to do is get right into the evening. The congressman will be doing a presentation, and then we'll be doing an opportunity that the congressman will be answering some of your pre-written questions throughout the evening after completion of his presentation. Basically, I just want to tell you that David was born in 1947, attended public schools, worked his way through college as a graduate of Purdue University with a degree in civil engineering. He continued the next 12 years after that in the construction industry, taught night classes, and established McKinley and Associates, an architectural engineering firm with offices in Charleston, Wheeling, and Washington, PA. At this time, I'm not going to go through this introduction that they've sent me. I'm going to let the congressman tell it from his own mouth. I give you Congressman David McKinley.
And thank you all. It's a little different height there, isn't it? You hear me all right now? All right. No, thank you all for coming out. What we're trying to do is just interact with people throughout the district and find out what's on your mind. Introduce myself if we haven't met each other, and try to take some message back to Washington. But we can sit here and give a campaign talk. I don't want to do a campaign talk. I want to hear as much from you all. So we're trying a little interaction. What we have typically do is ask people to do fill out cards. Have you done that? Okay, so you got that way. We tried one. This is about our 7th or 8th town hall meeting, and we've had sometimes where people get the microphone and they just kind of grab the scene, and it's hard to take that microphone away from them. So what we generally try to do is get back to where we're asking questions through the card. But at the end, I hope we can open it up a little bit to see what's on your mind, because I'm a 7th generation in West Virginia. So my grandson now is a 9th generation to grow up. This is our home. West Virginia is our state. It's our home. That's all I ever want to be is a West Virginian. And got this opportunity to serve in Congress, and I want to make the vote go. I want to be your voice. I don't have all the answers. What we're trying to do is listen to you. That's why we've been here all day, yesterday and the day before, and all. We've been traveling around the district, just listening to what people have to say, and trying to interact, trying to give you some sense of what has happened in Washington and why, to the extent that we can. And if maybe we won't have all the answers, but if we get some dialogue with that. But what I've also tried to do is bring some of our staff with me out of Washington. It's one thing, folks, and this is almost an example of it. My wife and I, it's almost a standing joke, but it's real. We take bottled water with us to Washington because I think whatever they drink over there is differently. So we take our own water with us when we go to Washington. And but we come home every weekend. So far, knock on wood, we've been home every weekend because this is our home. And we put a lot of miles on the car, but then we get back and we get out of the district. And we're trying to put together a piece that people understand how we're trying to get the message out and to hear from you all. We had already, in the first 6 months, we put 34,000 miles on my car in just 6 months. So that tells you we're trying. So what I've done today was I wanted to bring some of our staff from Washington and some from Morgantown area, because I think it's important for them to get outside the beltway of Washington and to see the people, look in your eyes, and to drive the roads and hear and see the issues that we're debating not only in our offices about issues, but also what's being talked about on the House floor. So we've asked some of our staff to come with us, and we've got 3 people that are part of our legislative team. Let's see if they'll wave their hands around here. Corey Toth, Adam, Drew. Okay, those are three out of Washington that have come. Corey, by the way, is from Fallonsby, West Virginia, up in the northern panhandle. And we also have Richie Parsons. Richie is our district director, and he works out in the Morgantown office. We have Linda Warwick. Where's Linda? Okay, your hand up. And Pam Krashansky. Pam, put the hand up. Pam's a native around here. Shame on you if you don't know Pam. But that's some of our team and what we're trying to do. One of the things that when we brought Linda on board, and she has been absolutely phenomenal. What we wanted to do was to break from the mold of where people, it's a patronage thing. I wanted just to continue to do the job that's right. And so when we were looking at our casework and some of the issues that we quickly learned that we faced, why not hire someone like Linda, who has been working at this job under my predecessor for years, and use the talent that she has learned over those 16 years. Don't worry about whether she's a Democrat or Republican. Can she do the job? Linda is doing an outstanding job, Linda. I want to thank you again for joining us, because she put aside to worry about whether it's a Democrat or Republican or independent. I want to make sure we've got the right people to do the right things to help you out, and I think it's going to work that way. But we've got a series of things I'd like to touch base with you about. That I've got some newspaper articles and whole host things. What we had done in the campaign, we talked about 4 things. Was jobs. We had a concern about jobs. Jobs are still out there. We still have a problem with jobs. The other was spending, and yeah, I think we touched on that a little bit. The other was healthcare, the Obamacare, and the other was trying to protect coal. Do we have that picture? Do we have a picture of our miner? Where's our big picture? I'm sorry you can't see this, but one thing when I went to Washington, and it's only been 7 months. I feel like I've been there 3.5 years, but what I've learned has been incredible. One of the first things I learned is that there is no respect in Washington for the coal mining industry. If anything, they'll put it out of business if they have any chance to do that. So I have this picture. This is a life-size picture of a coal miner, and he's in my office. Other people may have just a portrait. I want a life-size picture. When anyone walks in my office, where my desk is, they have to see that picture. I say, this is all about West Virginia. Is this man right here? James Brandon's name. And you can see, if the light were better on it, that he's just come out of a shift. He's covered with coal dust, tired, dirty. He's got all his safety gear on. He's a human being. Because one thing I've learned in Washington is they see him as statistics. We have so much percentage of people that are mining so much coal. No, there's a man. He's a father. He's a brother. He's an uncle. He's a grandfather. And he can be a father, and that's his daughter. I want people to understand, personalize what we do in Washington. Deal with human beings. And when we have the unemployment rate, let's make sure we do something about it, not just talk about it, but what are we doing about it? And this man, the industry, and our future in West Virginia is under attack. We do indeed have a war on coal. It's not just rhetoric. I have a front row seat to see what's going on in this battle against coal. The president told us going in that his idea was that he can't stop us from burning coal, but he will make it as expensive that we won't burn coal, that we'll switch to other uses. He's been good to his work. He is doing just that. And I could give you a whole host of things of what we're dealing with in the regulatory body. He can't pass a bill to stop us from burning coal, but he's using the regulatory bodies. The EPA, OSM, MSHA, you're seeing numbers of it. Now, I want to make sure that we all truly understand. I'm working for that guy. I'm working for anyone. I want to make sure that he has a safe work environment. And I just heard on the way in as we came in that another coal miner was killed today down in Logan County. I'm very sorry about that. But it just is an indication of just how tough that industry is. If you look in that man's eyes in the right light, you just see that grit and determination that makes us proud to be West Virginians. And when he goes to work, we have responsibilities as government, employers, and others to make sure that he goes home tonight, so he can put his arm around his daughter Kaylee, and he can give his wife a kiss. So we've got a job cut out for us, because right now, too many of our men are getting hurt. So it's a little bit of a mission in that mind. The other, if I go to one of the other subjects, is overspending. Okay, we're headed into some difficult times, perhaps, of how it, maybe not for you all, but for those of us in Congress who try to find ways of reducing spending. Because what's happened, and I'll be very frank, it's not just a Democrat issue. Republicans did the same thing. When they were in power, they spent less too. I know that. So there's no sense standing up here and say it's all their fault or all. As a nation, we haven't found the backbone in our leadership to get our spending under control. I can use big numbers, and I'm not used to dealing with trillions. I can deal with billions, but not trillions. But let me just tell you, the budget deficit right now, we bring in about $2.1 trillion a year, but we spend $3.7 trillion a year. Now, the guy said to me one time in the elevator, he knew, because again, I'm one of just 2 engineers in Congress, and he said, "You're talking like an engineer. Get down to basics, get down to other numbers that people can relate to when you talk to the crowd." So I lopped off some zeros out of that trillion, and I've tried this. If your family income is $21,000, but you have $37,000 in obligations, what do? You probably cut back on some expenditures. Okay? Now, some would have said, well, can we borrow money? Sure. Sure. With your credit card, using the same numbers, think about this. Think how much the bank is going to tell you. Your credit card already has $144,000 on it. Oh, and your bank is in China. Think about that. How? That's the dilemma we're in this country. Every one of those expenditures, please understand, every one of those expenditures probably has value. There's not thrown away. There's something that someone needed, some community needed, a sewer and water line, a new bridge, something, a healthcare project. But folks, we've reached the point that we've got to get it back under control. Let me give you a little example again to help illustrate it. With that kind of deficit every year, 1.4 to 1.6 trillion dollars. That means we're borrowing every day, 7 days a week, 4 weeks in a month, 52 weeks in a year, every day, $4 billion. Now, that may not mean a lot to you until you hear the next, which is the state of West Virginia operates its entire budget, with the exception of highways. It runs our school systems, our higher ed, our secondary, our health care, our safety, all aspects of government for $4 billion. It does it for an entire year. For an entire year. But every day the federal government is borrowing that amount of money just to pay the deficit, just to pay the debt. Don't you think that we've got a problem? And very carefully, we're going to have to come to grips with that. We're not going to solve it overnight, because it didn't happen overnight. I don't want to see us slash right away and leave people, seniors, or poor, or unemployed. I don't want to see them hurt. But I think we're all going to have to collectively find a way to come up with a solution. And it's going to take a few years. But I believe, if you listen, we were just talking back there about Connie Mack, a young Connie Mack out in Florida, has a plan to reduce it. He's got a way to do it. There are others who have come up with ways. I think we can have a balanced budget, balanced federal budget within 10 years. Now, the Ryan budget was one of the reasons I voted against it, and I was just one of 4 Republicans, because I'm not going to be a rubber stamp. If I think things are wrong for this state, the first district, I'm going to vote against it, regardless of whether my party supported it or not. And I think it had 2 things. I think, among other issues, it had problems. but it was too much of a cut, and so in the Medicare, it was too sharp. We can't afford to have that. And secondly, it didn't have a balanced budget until the year 2040. Well, I don't know about you, I'm not going to live that long. I want to see a balanced budget again, because I know what it does to our economy if we get our balanced budget again. So I'm holding out for that. I'm going to wait until, and I'm going to keep pushing what I can with our leadership to try to get a balanced budget. Now, on healthcare, the third element, the House, very quickly, early on in the session, voted to rescind the Obamacare and send it back over to the Senate. Now, what we have to do is we want to make sure when we did that is that we have an alternative. Because I don't want to go back to the old way, the way we did it. It didn't work. That's why the healthcare reform came about, because our present system was flawed. So we've got to have an alternative product to it. That's what we're working on. The Senate killed the bill. But we've indicated very clearly, we took a bold step and said, no. That healthcare system, one, I don't know if you get on the campaign, but it had problems with it, not the least of which was taking $500 billion out of Medicare to fund it. That's not the way to do it. So give us a little bit more time, and I think we're going to come up with a better healthcare system that I think is going to cross over. But the biggest shortcoming that we have still is our unemployment situation. That's still crippling our nation. And I don't care, we can solve all the other matters, but until we get more of our American workers back to work, I'm not going to be satisfied. I personalize it, folks. I've got two daughters who live on the West Coast, and they left here because they couldn't find a job in this area. My two sons are still living in Wheeling. We have 6 grandchildren. And I think it's emblematic of what's happening all across this country. The families are losing their children around them because they're trying to find jobs someplace where it is. West Virginia is just not here. So I'm going to treat this very personally. I'm going to work on this to try to get my children home. Because if I can get my children home to jobs, then I think your children will be able to find jobs as well. We've got to find a way to create enough opportunities here. And it's not necessarily working in coal or steel plant or chemical plant, but we've got to be able to diversify our economy. And one of the things that's happening in Washington, unfortunately, is this overregulation. It's stymieing it. It's hurting our growth. It's intimidating people as to where to go. We talked with a company last week, and actually another man said it today, that they would hire on more people, but they're not sure what's going to happen with the economy and what's happening with the administration. Are they going to raise the corporate rate? Are they going to put more regulations on it? So they're just pulling back. Listen, I had 45 years in small business. If I felt uncertainty around me, I would pull back too. Until we saw a clear path. Once that clear path is it, then you would start again. Right now, they're not comfortable. They're a little afraid there could be another problem crop up. So they're waiting for a little bit better direction on where things are going. Let me give just a little example of one of the issues that we're dealing with in Washington, and maybe you all heard of. Have you all heard where the president's calling for a payroll tax extension? Hands went up on that. Sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it? Payroll tax extension. But you all know what the payroll tax, what it is? It's a rate on Social Security. I don't think enough people understand that. I mean, folks, we sit there in Congress and listen to them and they'll talk about how Social Security is going to go broke if we don't put more money, we don't raise the level, the aid level, all these different issues. We've got to put more money into it. Okay? It's going broke. There's a deadline. But then they turn around and say we're going to have a payroll tax exemption, which will eliminate the payroll tax paid by the employee. The employer will continue to do it. That's okay. But the employee won't be paying into Social Security. Well, how does that work? If you've got a problem, why would you cut off the cash stream to help subsidize it, to help the program continue to go? It's beyond me. And partially it's maybe because not enough people in Congress have ever met a payroll. They don't understand. Payroll tax exemption, doesn't that sound neat? And it'll give you $1,000 perhaps in a year's time, or $700 depending on what your income is. But when you dig into it and find out it's taking money that would have gone to Social Security to take care of our seniors, not with my vote. We're going to see how we can address this thing. If they think that's going to stimulate the economy, that's the kind of short-term fix that Washington doesn't get. They've got to have long-term vision. I feel like I'm the oldest member of the freshman class. And I used to say to my kids, their vision of the future is next weekend. I think the future is a lot longer than just 7, 8 days out. I want something that's 20 to 30 years where we're going to go. But this kind of Band-Aid approach is only going to hurt a lot of people with that. So I've got to see what we're going to do with it. We have a lot of other folks. I'll do this before we start taking questions. Because they raise absolutely legitimate questions. They call in our office and say, what you have to do is eliminate the loopholes in the tax code. Absolutely. And where do you want to start? Well, those jets. We're subsidizing people with private jets. Yes. Well, we're not really subsidizing. All we're doing is I don't want to get it. It's a rapid depreciation. They still pay the same tax, but they just pay it over a shorter period of time, or longer period of time. So here, if you eliminated, I got to tell you, I canvassed this from a congressman from Arizona. I saw him with this presentation on it. I just thought it just so helped make the point. We copied it and we made words out of it. And what it is over there, it's the last one in the lower corner. Okay, you can't see it on there. If you look at our budget deficit for a day's time, okay? For a day, what if we're going to subsidize just in a day's time? If you eliminated that airplane, that rapid depreciation on the corporate jets, that would represent 15 seconds in a 24-hour clock. Okay? It sounds good, and I'm glad to go away with it. I don't have a problem with it. But don't think it's the solution. It's just part of it. Let's go to another one. This is one that's always a pet project that people talk about. Is we've got to do away with those evil Bush tax cuts for the wealthy. Let's talk about it. Let's find out what it is. Let's see the impact. The impact is 28 minutes of a 24-hour clock. Now, this is one that has a lot of impact. The wars in Iran, Afghanistan, Libya. Tax incentive for oil companies. If that would take 3 hours off the calendar. Here, if you took it, if you just have the oil breaks, and again, I don't disagree with you. I don't have a problem with eliminating some of the subsidies and the incentives for our oil industry. I don't have a problem with that. But all we do, 2.2 minutes. What I'm trying to illustrate here to you is the magnitude of our debt. And there's not going to be an easy, quick fix. It's going to be one that's going to be very complex. It's going to involve a lot of entities and how we can come up with that solution. But I thought that was a clever way of using the clock to try to demonstrate. Because at the end of the day, other than the 3 hours after the war, I still don't understand what we're doing in Libya. Maybe you all can tell me. That is our war. But we're there. I tell you right now, if we're there, and we got men and women in harm's way, my God, as a nation, we better stand behind them. Bring them home. But we can't sit there and just harp about it. You got to do one of two things. The same thing with Afghanistan and Iraq. What are we doing there? Let's make sure our mission is clear. I spent a lot of time talking to the veterans, and you hear a lot of stories about it. If we're doing the right thing, be there. But if once we lose what our mission is, bring them home and stop this hemorrhaging. Now, let me just add one more thing. I've been doing an awful lot of talking. When I talk about a $1.6 trillion deficit, that does not include the war. The wars, I learned, the wars are not on the budget. even if we did away with all of it, it's still a $1.6 trillion deficit. I just use that to show you the magnitude of the problem. It's 3 hours. But they're not in the budget. It's not in the budget. It's just something we're paying for. So the sooner we get that thing under control, the better off we're going to be. I'd like to get some thoughts from you all about the job. Let's see if we can answer some of your questions. And then Mayor, if you could put me on the spot. Hopefully some of these are not gotcha questions. You know, I'm so tired of gotcha questions. Because I tell you, you're going to get me sometime. I don't have all the answers. I'm doing the best we can. And I want you to know we're trying, that's why we're here, to listen. Go ahead, Mayor.
Okay, first question we have is, what are you doing to bridge the divide between West Virginians making their livelihood from coal mining and gas extraction and those suffering from the negative aspects, such as myself, was the question.
As to what was the last?
Suffering from the negative aspects of the gas extraction.
Okay. One is, I want to document it. There are a lot of stories out there as I travel around the district. And we've talked to hundreds, if not, well, I'm sure thousands of people in the last 7 months. And we're hearing a lot of stories. One is, and please, if you can document it, let me know. But we even went to the EPA and said, we're hearing so many stories about the Marcellus Shale that when they're drilling, they're destroying people with water tables. Is that accurate? And honestly, it's one of the few times I'm going to agree with Lisa Jackson. She had to admit there's no documented case of that. Could it be? Yes. And that's what I'm looking for. I want to hear enough cases of that so we can see what it is. Did it really? And we're not finding that yet. Now, could there be problems? Absolutely. Could they be tearing up our roads? Yes. Go up to Marshall County and look what they're doing there. Go over to Preston County. I don't know about how much drilling they're doing here for the Marcellus, but they're doing a lot of damage to the roads, and they need to be fixed. At the right time, whatever that time is, then they're going to have to come back and fix those roads. As it relates to coal, there are, again, a lot of stories, and they're painful stories many times. I'm trying to eliminate a problem that people have a perception that fly ash, that flies, for those of you who don't know, I don't want to talk too many engineering terms here, but fly ash is an unavoidable byproduct of burning coal. When you burn coal, you get an ash. If you throw a log on your fireplace, you'll get an ash from wood, okay? So it's just a byproduct of burning coal. And over the years, the Clean Air Act back in the 70s, said we don't want that fly ash anymore going up into the atmosphere. We want you to collect it so that we have clean air. And I agree. And it worked. So they captured it. And they're doing a great job capturing it. We have the cleanest air we've had in years, decades, as a result. But, so then some entrepreneurs found out, well, what can we do with this fly ash? Because we're creating about 140 to 150 million tons of it every year, all across America. In 48 of the 50 states, every day we're creating fly ash. What are we going to do with it? Well, years ago, they were saying, back in the late 80s and 90s, some people started saying, well, it's a hazardous material. We ought to ban the use of it. That may be. So the EPA did a study under Bill Clinton in 1993. They did another study in the year 2000. Both times, under Clinton administration, both times EPA came back and said, it's not a hazardous material. We've got stacks, an 1.5 inch thick books about it's not hazardous. Are there problems with it? Of course. But is it a hazardous material? No. My attitude is, back to answer the question, until someone can show me through the EPA and an unbiased report, I'm going to defend the coal industry burning coal. Because if we can't use that fly ash, 40% of that fly ash is recyclable. We use it in concrete, we use it in concrete blocks, we use it in brick. It's used in ceramic tile. It's used in drywall. You may have some in this room with some drywall created from fly ash. It's used in cosmetics. It's used in toothpaste. pharmacy friend back there, you may not like hearing that necessarily, and I don't know anything he would do with it, but it's used in these kinds of products. Because they tested it and found out it was not hazardous. The level of toxicity is not that unlocked like rocks and so in your backyard. But is it got issues? Yes. And let's make sure we do it properly. Let's handle it properly. Otherwise, what we're going to do is, if we're going to continue to burn coal, we're going to just take more mountaintops, more ravines, more places, and we're going to fill it in. Is that what we want to do? Take up more land for landfills? Or can we recycle it until it's proven? So I want to make sure that people understand the product. Don't get caught up in it's a toxic material. It's got issues. It's not a hazardous material according to the EPA. And the EPA and I are not the best of friends. Okay? But in this one, they realize it's an issue. But here's the problem. The president has said, you all heard during the campaign, he said, I know that. He said, but I'm just gonna, and you saw it in the campaign, he said, I can't ban coal, but I'm gonna make it so expensive to burn that people are gonna find alternative uses. And I've seen one example of it. In one of our briefings, we had a lady from Purdue University came in. She said she was representing they were gonna replace a coal-fired burner boiler on the campus, small unit. And she said they found out that it could be a hazardous material they were creating. So she canceled the project. And they switched to gas. I said, tell me more about this, because this is an issue that's sweeping the country. And she said that I said, first, what was it costing you to handle the fire? She said $300,000. But she said she called in a consultant out of Chicago, which is nearby. And they came down and they gave her a report. If it's considered a hazardous material, as the president's talking about doing, for Purdue University, to switch from $300,000, it costs me $25 million a year to handle fly ash. So she said, very simple. You just switch to gas. How many other plants? Mount Storm, Mitchell, Cardinal, Amos, all plants in West Virginia. What happens if we can't burn coal because of the cost of handling the fly ash? So let's just make sure, that's a very long answer to the question, let's just make sure that it really is a hazardous to us. We're going to protect coal. I want to make sure that coal can be used because it's the backbone of the state of West Virginia. 50% of the revenue to operate the state of West Virginia comes from that one industry, coal. So when we attack coal, you're attacking the essence of we're going to have to find other money then to replace it. Now, is that going to be increase the sales tax on food tax back? What it is, I don't know. I don't even want to go there because it could be catastrophic to us. All the thousands of men that will be out of work and all the people with secondary support. I just don't want to see that. But there are a lot of scary stories. So, Mayor, it was a way long answer. Hopefully the next one it won't be so long.
Okay. What is your positioning on the Obamacare?
No, I think I gave that pretty good indication. I voted against it and to rescind it. But I know there are people out there that like it. I understand that. And I think there's some components of it that are absolutely fine. But the only way to address it is we got to start all over again. And that's what I want to do. I know that there are some components, things like pre-existing conditions. Great idea. But why not? Why can't we get insurance across state lines as for employers? Individuals. Why can't we do that? Why don't we have personal accountability so that we can adjust our rates individually for that? I grew up, we need to have tort reform. That's not in there. It's just better start again. It was a reasonable effort, but it was done in very partisan. There was not one Republican vote for it. That doesn't mean we have all Republicans. We don't know all the answers. But it showed the way it was passed late at night, and no opportunity for amendments. Think about that. There were not one amendment could be offered to that piece of legislation under Nancy Pelosi. I don't know whether you all understand that or not, the impact of that. But I was in the West Virginia legislature. Every bill that came before us was subject to amendment. As long as it was germane, we could offer any amendment we wanted to it. And I felt good about being conscious because I was always in the minority in West Virginia, but it was always interesting to hear the debate. And you would thought that in Congress, they have a different rule. It's up to the speaker. It's up to the speaker. She said on the health care bill, no amendments. Now, under Boehner, sometimes I there, it paid for some long nights. But we've had bills called under the open rule. We had 700 amendments on one bill. We just are working right now, we're not finished with it. We had 600 and some amendments. We've been there 4 nights voting. But that's the American way. I don't mind being there late if we're getting people an opportunity to offer an amendment. Under the health care bill, she prevented any amendments being offered. So we got what they wrote. I don't think that's right. So it was time. We're going to try to come back with a replacement. I don't think we're going to be successful with it for a few more years, but we're still working on it. I'm definitely opposed to that bill the way it is written right now. And we're seeing there must be something wrong with it. When over 3,000 organizations have opted out of it, they've been given a waiver. There must be something to it. If the government's giving people waivers so they don't have to participate in it. Now an entire state is asking for a waiver from it. At the end, it really may be not going to make any difference. It's going to be decided by the Supreme Court of the United States. And I wish they could make that decision quickly because it's causing a lot of uncertainty across America. I'm sorry, another big question.
Who would you support for a Republican presidential nomination?
No, you're not going to get that out of me. First, my guy isn't running anymore. So I learned that, just be careful with this. Gary, I mean, Gary Howe is a good friend of mine. He's a good representative for you. Gary knows there's a time to keep your mouth shut when it comes to support. But there's some very interesting candidates out there. I thought that the Iowa, what was it, their straw poll, whatever that meant, made interesting debate. I know Michelle Bachmann. She's a true lady. And she's a committed Tea Party conservative. I'm a member of her caucus. There are about 30 of us that joined the caucus because we believe in smaller government and control spending. I don't have a problem with it, but Michelle's just one of numbers. I had this Rick Perry that's coming in from Texas. All the Texas delegations always come over and tell me about what a great governor he was. Well, let's find out. That's what this debate's all about. So it's going to be fun over the next few months as we listen to all these candidates be vetted in this process. But you watch. I'm kind of keeping an eye on Rubio out of Florida as being a VP for somebody. Watch Christie being potential VP out of New Jersey. Just series of them. It's going to be very interesting. Just hold on to your seat. I've never seen so many candidates. It's obvious that Republicans don't have a real strong front runner yet. Yes, sir.
Okay, this next question, Congressman, deals with the topic that we just spoke of at dinner, involving the exit to the north end of the area that's landlocked. Did you comment any on that from our conversation?
Yeah, we had a great meeting, and this is what we're trying to do. Come to your meet with your city council, meet with your county commission. And just sit down with I met with your county commission already. And we just sat and we talked about some of these issues. But this is another one. We're trying to learn so we can represent you the right way. What are they doing? How would you design a bridge and landlock people? I'm an engineer. I'm a structural engineer. I got to tell you, it looks to me like there may have been a mistake in the design. Anything that landlocks people that they can't get out in case of an emergency. So we talked about a couple of solutions that just the first thing came to mind. I'm going to work with the mayor. I've already said I'll send a letter, and we'll make a phone call, and we'll do what we can on it. But I think there's been a mistake in the design. Not only is it landlocked people, but even the discharge off the bridge causing a swamp to occur, and that runoff because the EPA, they can't run it back into the river right away. What's that all about? If Maryland can take care of it in the right way, why can't we in West Virginia? So let's go to work on that. It sounds like it's very much of a state issue, but whatever I can, I'm going to help. I'm gonna take some of my engineering, maybe I can help you out. Go ahead.
Okay, the next question involves
Didn't I
Medicare
understand
fraud.
about $2 million, something like that, around $2 million?
Yeah, the estimate that I was provided today, DOH, was roughly 1.5 plus engineering
Yeah,
costs.
1.5 plus another 250 again. Look, I served in the legislature for those 14 years, and we never had the surpluses that we have in right now. What was it, the paper just the other day, was it $300 million? Something like that, $300 million that they've been able to accumulate, or, you know, just this past year, they have almost $700 million in the surplus. Which is more important, building up the surplus or taking care of the people? $2 million, we can solve this problem. I think we have, I'm looking forward to talking to whoever the governor is going to be, whether it's Earl Ray or Bill Maloney, to find out who it is. And why can't we take some of that money to take care of these matters? People's security is more important than us having a large cash balance at the end of the year. If we've got 300, if we got 300 million, can we not take $2 million out of it to take care of the problem? Yes, sir.
What do you feel can be done about the Medicare fraud problem?
Obviously, it's a very complex. Did you all hear that? What's the issue of the Medicare fraud? It's a huge problem. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has indicated, and the accounting office has said that we're talking at least, they say at least anywhere from 50 to 100 billion with a B dollars a year in fraud. If it were easy to fix, I think they would have got it by now. It's not. But I have a problem with it from a very fundamental sense. They use a system in the federal government that's unlike those of us in the private sector. They use a system called pay and chase. Whatever comes in, whatever bill comes in, they pay it. Then they start an audit and find out, wait a minute, that person wasn't authorized to do that. That person shouldn't have been getting it. And then they go chase them to try to get the money back. Well, pay and chase. It's no wonder that we lose this. In my business, in the construction business, we would design about $100 million worth of construction every year. And when I represented my clients, I would make sure before we would release any money to a contractor that they did what they were supposed to do and it was in conformity with the contract. Then we paid them. I'm trying to figure out, I've had meetings with them. Adam, you know, we've already talked about this. We're trying to find a way to do that reverse. But remember, I'm just one voice out of 435 in the House. But I don't know why we're not confirming that the service was warranted, justified, and appropriate before we write a check. $50 to $100 billion a year. And they say that's manageable. Think about that. If we can operate our state of West Virginia at just $4 billion, there are $50 billion every year they're perhaps going away, maybe as high as $100 billion. That's a number that's wrong. So I want to change from the pay and chase to confirm and then write a check. It's going to be a hardship for the first few months for some of our people, our vendors, our doctors and pharmacists and others. But I've got to find a way that we stop this deceitful practice because it's hurting all of us and it's causing our system. That's why, one of the reasons why we need this reform, because without it, that's hastening the problem we have with Medicare, where we have the issue. Mayor?
Next question is, can you shed any light on how we can obtain money for local projects on our infrastructure?
Over the years, Congress the earmarks. They were abused. They were all good reasons. I'm sure every earmark probably had some very valid reason for it. As I said earlier, sewer and water line, a bridge, sidewalks, repaving a road. They all have, but there was money we didn't have. And they started borrowing so much that now our grandchildren are the ones that are going to be paying for it. So one of the early things we did in Congress was we stopped the earmarks. The American public was saying we should stop them. Now, what's the alternative? What we want to do now is, for example, put money into the infrastructure by putting it into a pool. It doesn't say Kaiser, sewer and water line, or separating for their storm drainage. It puts money into a pool. We put that money into a pool, and then you compete for it. That's okay. That will pass the test. That's not an earmark. Money can be in an account, but you have to compete for it. Right now, there is no such thing. You follow how that would work. For example, the WVU is been shorted research money, and they were getting it from the National Energy Technology Lab. That's in Morgantown. The National Energy Technology Lab is one of just 5 labs across the country. It's one of the top 2, the largest labs on research on coal, fossil fuels. And the president said in his address, if you remember in January, he said, I'm going to put money into research, we're going to put money into development, we're going to find ways that outproduce all the countries of the world again. We're going to be the powerhouse. I thought he was referring to our clean coal technology. And then we got his budget, and we found out that he slashed funding, cut out the funding for the National Energy Technology Lab. He cut it so badly that the EU now is going to have trouble making its obligations on its own research. So we're trying to work back, putting money, if we can put money back into the National Energy Technology Lab, that's not an earmark. But then if we can put money back into it, they will be able to continue to transfer monies over to WVU and help. It's that kind of process. But we got to be careful. Got to be careful that we don't run up the debt any higher. So we just heard of a project today. I won't give you more of the details with it, but there used to be $20 million in the account. $20 million. It affects this community. Terrific. The president zeroed it out of the budget to 0. There's now no money in that account to take care of this entity that operates here in Mineral County. We're going to put that money back in. We have to find other ways. It won't be an earmark, but we're going to find money to put it back in because we can't do that for the jobs here in Mineral County. We've got to find ways of doing it without an earmark. Yes, sir.
Question is a concern of the cutbacks in our military involving our ability to defend. Is there any help forthcoming?
Certainly a valid question. You heard that was would the cutbacks affect our ability for national security? Yes, they certainly could. I'm a big advocate of defense spending here in our country. It's one of the few things in this document that I carry with me. It's all beat up. It's national defense. It's one of the few things that's called out here. So let's make sure that we don't do the things that hurt us. But you'll be watching the newspaper as well as I. We put that committee together, 12 people, to try to reduce spending. There's 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans. If they can't come up with an agreement, if they don't come to an agreement, then there is Plan B. They're trying to cut, they've got to cut at least $1.2 trillion. And I can tell you that now that S&P is weighed into the game, I think they're going to cut more than $1.2 trillion. But right now, that's the minimum they have to cut through, can't come up with $1.2 trillion in spending reduction acceptable to the House and the Senate, there is Plan B. Plan B is 50% of it comes out of defense, and 50% of it comes out of discretionary spending. That means defense, we get another $600 billion reduction. They did it that way because they wanted to be the most ugly alternative that we wouldn't accept. I hope you're right. I don't want to subject our nation to that kind of cut in a short period of time. I will not stand here and tell you there isn't some waste in spending in the Defense Department. Yes, probably is. But there's not that level. And I don't want, I'm very candid, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to tinker much with that defense. I want to make sure we're safe. I want to make sure that we don't have any more of this terrorism in this country. If we have to spend extra dollars and we have to do this kind of, I want to make sure we're safe. So it's a very sensitive thing. We'll be careful with it. And I'm telling you, that's going to be the challenge. If they cut $600 billion out of defense, or the defense is only, I shouldn't say only, it's something in the $700 billion range. So cutting $600 billion over 10 years, that's almost 10% every year. 10% one year, 10% the next, 10% the next. Folks, that's serious money. That's serious. Yes, sir.
What's your position on illegals?
Go Arizona. And, I applaud what Arizona is trying to do. I think it's wrong for the president to file a suit against the state to protect itself. The federal government is going to do their job and let the state do it. Texas is facing the same situation. I think, didn't I read Alabama now is doing something down there? Are they being sued next by the federal government in Alabama? No. That issue does not come before my committee, and it is something that's very important. That I want to make sure that someone's here illegally, knowingly illegally, that they be returned. But at the same time, I want any employer that knowingly is hiring someone illegally, that they should be punished severely for this. Okay? Because they're taking advantage of the American worker. They're hiring some of these people that are willing to, and the American worker is sitting there on the side. Punish the American employer that's doing that, hurting the American public. So I'm fine with that, and I can go on. I don't think we should have, I agree with the European thing. It's one of the key things I did to that. The president, I think, wants us to be more of a European welfare state. But one of the things that I do think is great is that what they've done in Europe, they said for them to get residency in any of the nations in Europe, one of the two parents has to be a legal citizen. Think about what that would do in America if we require one of the two. Instead of just coming over here having a baby, neither one of them being legal, they shouldn't. I have a problem with it. I'm not sure they should be an American citizen. One of the two should be legal. And lastly, I want our immigration. If they're going to come to America, I want them to learn the English language. I'm tired of going to Walmart's and Kmart and wherever it is, and I have to read signs in Spanish. I don't want to push number 2 on my telephone dial. You want your instructions in Spanish or English. You're relegating those people to a second-class culture by allowing that to continue. We're Americans. We're not Europe West. Yes, sir.
Okay. You spoke briefly on this. We have multiple questions that deal with your vote in raising the debt ceiling and its direct input on the AAA rating.
Very complex. We were briefed extensively about that. And we were told, don't push our luck with a default. never done that in this country. And we had meetings with S&P, Moody's, Fitch's, and others. They said, if you cut $4 trillion out of the budget, and we did that, that they would put us on the watch, meaning they still can do it in the future, but they were not going to downgrade our bond rating. I didn't want to take a chance, because the president had already come out and made his remark that if we did not raise the debt ceiling, he said, if you remember the quote, you remember the thing in the paper, it said, senior citizens, you may not get your Social Security card check. I don't like that kind of gamesmanship. Whether he was serious about that or not, I don't think that kind of tactic of scaring people should be in our public any longer. So I introduced a bill. It did not move because we're still watching, and that was, if we did get into that, if we did get into an impasse, we said, here are the spending that you're gonna have to do. Social Security, Medicare, paying our military. We prioritized how the money could be spent. But folks, there would not have been enough money. And the American public, we could not cut the amount of money we had to cut to do that. It was not an easy vote by any stretch. But we got a commitment out of it. One of the most important was that there was going to be a vote for balanced budget. The Senate is going to vote on a balanced budget. We couldn't get it up to the Congress. Remember, the balanced budget has not been voted on for 15 years in Congress. So we had to make a decision. I want to try that. I want to give the opportunity to the American public to vote on that. So I voted. I voted to do it. Remember, it did not increase spending. It paid for the bills that we had, previous Congresses had already authorized. It would be like if you gave your credit card to your son and he went out and had a big dinner, and then the check, the bill came to you and you said, I'm not going to pay for it. That's not America. We took that credit card from our son and we're cutting it up. And in that budget, we cut $4 trillion spending. That's what's going to happen when this committee gets back. It's only a start. I wanted to argue, they know that. I had a conversation with Maynard and Cantor. I wanted a lot more than $4 trillion. We were able to do it. So I'd like, given the facts that we had about the issue of default, I don't want to play chicken. Not with the American public, not with the bond market, not with the stock market, not with your pension funds, retirement, 401ks. We've got to bring some stability, so I voted for it. I wasn't the first to sign up with it. We've got to make sure that we take care of our senior citizens. We've got to make sure our military is paid. And I didn't want to take a risk with the president play games. I'm sorry. If you disagree, I'd like to hear what's the alternative. Because we sure experimented with an awful lot of stuff. And I'm sorry that it scared you with all the information that was out there. But we were trying to deal with the facts. I didn't like the alternative. So reluctantly, I voted for it. And then they turned on us. And S&P dropped our rating. Our mission now, we get back to what all this happened since we adjourned. We have not come back in session. The Senate said they're not going to take up anything, so we're not going back in session until we know that the Senate can act on something. But I can assure you, this is going to be front and center when we go back in session about how we're going to correct this what S&P just did in this country. Yes, sir.
Okay, this will be the last question. I've been asked to explain to everyone that if your question in fact did not get answered, that if you wish to address your question with your contact information, the Congressman's office will get back with you with the answer to your question. We've tried to take the questions and group them. A lot of questions were overlapping and try to get the most benefit to each one. final question will be, Congressman, what is your position on the unfunded EPA mandate? You touched briefly, but could you elaborate more on that?
My position on unfunded EPA mandates, is that correct?
That's correct.
I have a great problem with what the EPA is doing. We're trying, we've got a bill, I'm one of the co-sponsors of it. We're trying to get the EPA, before it issues any edict, any decision, we're trying to get them in statute, not by executive order, statute, that they have to do an economic impact statement before they issue their decision. You have to understand, back in January through March, when we raised that question to Lisa Jackson with EPA, she said, I have no responsibility under the code to do that. My responsibility, she said, was to the health, safety, and welfare of the American public. And our question back to her was, what about the health, safety, and welfare of the people you just put out of work because of your edict? We can't afford to do it. Whether that's clean air, clean water, none of us want dirty water. We don't want that. We've got to find some balance here. So we're fighting the EPA. And to his credit, I'll tell you, where the president is with us, and he said on this, he said, he heard so many of us saying, you needed to have a report about the impact. And he issued an executive order that said from here on out, before any of these regulations are issued, they have to have an economic impact statement associated with it. In conjunction with that, you'll see that come to this unfunded mandate. If it was wrong when the West Virginia legislature did it, it's wrong for federal government to do it. We're trying to get legislation adopted that mirrors much of what we did in West Virginia. And that way, before any rule or reg, unfunded mandate or not, can be adopted into law. If it has an impact of $100 million or more nationally, it has to come before Congress for approval. What's the matter with that? But we can't get it passed yet. There are members of Congress who do not want us involved. They feel this is up to the president to decide. And as long as the president makes that decision and we can't override it, we can't stop any of these unfunded mandates. So those of us that have business experience, those of us that served in the legislature that see the value of control, we're trying. I'm one voice, but I'm a loud voice. I've already been reprimanded several times by leadership for speaking out of turn. People said to me behind me, I said, when we were talking about the deficit we have, they said, we're not broke. Keep spending. That's going to get us out of this obligation. And I turned to him and I said, Henry, what part of $14.4 trillion don't you understand? And they took me like, no. That's not how we talk around here. But someone has to stand up and say, the king has no clothes. And I'm willing to do that because I'm not trying to build a career in Washington. I'm there to try to represent you. I'm going to make some mistakes, but I'm going to listen to you. And what we're saying on that, I want to see those regulations because those regulations are hurting communities. When they issue this thing about sewer and water lines, Craig, you know it from the West Virginia legislature. How many times the state issued something and we've had to come back and we struggle because they don't give the money with it. Just do this, but no money. It's bad enough when you get overrun in legislature. Think of us as federal government. When you're talking about 300 and some million people out there that we're hurting when we do this kind of thing. So, folks, we're going to try to rein them in. But our regulatory bodies have become rogue agencies. They're out of control because there's no one overseeing other than the President of the United States. and this president is very supportive of what they're doing. All I can say, with my political hat, I hope Jimmy Carter is just a one-term president. That's his mind. Could I ask if there's something that one or two of you, because we are over our time now, but I'd like to hear examples, some of your own thoughts. We had a great meeting with the mayor and council. They gave us some very good ideas. But if there's something, a couple of you, I think you said you'd like to talk to me after the meeting. Okay, so I'll try to answer your question. If there's a question for one of you, I'd like to try to answer it for you. Yes, sir.
No, I had a question that was not submitted.
Okay.
I was the first one here this evening, and I don't know how Mr. Rhodes determined what questions were to be answered first and which questions were being put aside. My question involves Social Security.
Yes.
The cap.
Yes.
106,502. Why the cap? It seems more of those who afford to pay into Social Security, that would make Social Security more solvent as well as Medicare.
Well, you don't want to hold Medicare as an example of solvency because it's got some serious problems, just as bad as Social Security. And that's but what you're raising, I mean, just tell you, his question, that's an absolutely valid question about whether we should stop at $106,000. That's one thing that I know the committee of the 12, they're looking at that as an alternative to it. But I'll go another step with it. I think another thing that I think should be discussed is what I call the means testing. I want to explore that a little bit to find out. We've already, Adam, we've looked into it. We're finding the government is discouraging us from doing that. But I think there are some people that because of their wealth, like Bill Gates, maybe because he would test out the means testing, that Bill Gates would not get Social Security.
Well, in 2009, okay, Congress elected not to give Social Security a raise. Didn't happen then, that didn't happen in 11. Yet, back in 2009, Congress gave themselves a $30,000 a year raise. It looks like a situation we have a fox with mine in the hand now.
Well, and I don't think the best of you. I wasn't there 2 years ago.
I know. I'm not putting that on you.
But let me correct a couple things. I didn't hear that Social Security did not get the recipients for 2 years running. And during the campaign, I told you that was wrong. One of the things I've introduced was a bill that changes the formula so that they would qualify for that, because I don't think that was right. I don't think that they should be under the same cost of living index that a 30-year-old is. I think seniors have other issues. I'm a senior, for God's sake. We face other matters with it. So I want to see a different formula, and I've introduced legislation that would change the formula to make sure the seniors do get a cost of living increase in the future, because they're facing expenses that not otherwise we'd have. Now, as to I think I just gave you two ideas how we may be looking at Social Security. One potentially could be raising the age, and the others could be means testing. And the other thing you mentioned was the salary. They didn't get a $30,000 increase. It was much less than that, but they did vote themselves a salary hike. I don't know that it's ever going to happen again, but nevertheless, that did happen.
Well, you have to realize that when we now get our Social Security check with no pay raises for 2 years, that the Medicare deduction and prescription drug prices are going up. And we have less of that check to spend.
What I'm trying to tell you, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to see it debated when we have that chance to vote on it. Right now, they're trying to compile several alternatives, and that's one of them. And there are other alternatives with it. We're going to look at that because I want to make sure seniors never get cut again. That we should not have done that. But that was before I went there. I said it was wrong, so I've introduced a bill to correct it. I can only do what I said I was going to do. And that's what I'm trying to do, and we're going to try to send that message.
Well, I realize you're only one. It takes more than one.
I'm loud and crabby. How about one last question that didn't get asked? Yes, sir. And then we are going to close up. Yes,
I'd like to ask you this, do you think that the educational system should be required to guarantee a parent when they send a child to the first grade, that the child will get the necessary education to go to the second grade?
so you're saying
I want a guarantee.
okay, a guarantee that our education system is doing its job?
That's right.
Okay, well, let me just first. I'm not trying to duck this. That's not a federal issue. That's a state issue. Okay? I think they should. I think they should give some, but I want to be careful because there's in this document here, the Constitution, that we do not have an obligation to do that. You understand that? There's nothing in here about education. It's about defense. But I'm telling you that there's one time where I want to work with education because I don't think there's a bigger, as important as illness and defense is, making sure our kids get educated. Okay? I want to make sure that nothing gets cut in their funding, Pell Grants and others. So I want to try to do the best we can. I'm working with a big budget right now that we're trying to find ways of balancing it. I don't know what's going to be cut, but I want to make sure that our kids get an education, especially here in West Virginia when we rank last in almost every statistic.
You have to give me a guarantee that you're going to work on that.
Oh, I'll give you the guarantee I'll work for it, but I'm not in
Do you agree with it?
I agree with you. I agree with you that we have the responsibility to see that our kids get an education. I agree with that. To get the best education they can.
Well, I'd like to hear something in the future on it.
Well, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Hear it out.
Thank you all very much.
From the mayor's desk and the city council of Kaiser, I'd like to personally thank Congressman McKinley for coming in this evening, having dinner with us, listening to our issues, which are your issues. I'd like to thank him for his commitment to help us on the North End project. He has also committed that he will come back to Kaiser and sit down at another roundtable with the mayor and council for our future issues. And for that, I'd like to thank you.